Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artists Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier with the Artist Index, the South Coast Artist Index podcast. And this is our first ever live stream podcast. And it's special in a lot of ways. First of all, we're out in the public instead of in our studio or doing a Zoom podcast recording. And we are also probably one of the newest partners with AHA. And June is Pride Month, and we are here at Play Arcade, which is a great place to be. And we have 4 great guests that cover the spectrum of the arts and creativity from the LGBTQ community. And we're just going to let it roll from there. But before we get going, or as we officially get going, I'm going to have Andrew Pollock introduce himself and tell us why he's here, because I mean, you're special because you're the president of something, right?
Yeah. I'm special.
You're special.
So my name is Andy Pollock. I'm the president of the South Coast LGBT Network. And the network has been in existence till 2014, when it started as a small group of folks who wanted to be the conduit for services for LGBT people in the South Coast. And what they quickly realized was that there wasn't the services to be the conduit for. So we realized quickly that we had to provide services for our community. And it sort of chugged along for about 5 years. And I took over as president. We were about a budget of $35,000 and a part-time employee of 10 hours a week. And we decided to focus on the most vulnerable in our population for programmatic reasons, and that was trans individuals, youth, and elders. And from that time, we've worked incredibly hard to develop programs and support those folks in those communities. So right now we have a budget we went from $35,000 to about $660,000. We went from a part-time employee of 10 hours a week to 13 employees that are working for us. We've opened offices in Fall River and in Taunton. And we bought a building in downtown New Bedford, the old Sister Rose's homeless shelter, which we've raised $3 million to date. Probably have a little bit more to raise, but we're looking really good for an opening of Pride next year. That's the goal, is to open the building. And it's the only one of its kind in Massachusetts. There's nothing else that exists like that in the whole state. So I'm so proud to be here today to talk about creativity, to talk about the LGBT spirit that lends itself to creativity, but also talk about the network and what the network's been doing, the framework. I'm extremely proud of the team of people that have been working with us. We encourage people to get involved. We like people to reach out and step up to the network and to organize our community. We're really making a difference, especially among vulnerable populations, but just in general, in the people. And that's not without, our progress is not without violence perpetrated against us. We've also taken a stance of peaceful disengagement. So we trained 100 people in techniques to disengage from protesters and violence, and we police ourselves. So the word undeterred comes to mind quite a bit in our approach, that even though we have been facing violence and threats of violence, that we move forward, and we move forward in this collective together.
Wow. Before we continue, we have 2 more guests here and 1 more on standby. We have Jim Mercer, who is both well, I'll let him tell you first, and then we'll move over to our next guest.
Well, thank you, Ron, and thank you, Andy, for inviting me here tonight. And he asked if I would come and speak about creativity in how it related to my chef career, or how it relates to food, and which it certainly does. And I had a very long. I'm proud of my career as a chef, and I feel like I was able to have creative control actually for the entire span of my career, which is probably 30 years. I started when I was 24 years old, and I always had creative control, and I always was running a team of my own. How I got there, I'm not exactly sure, but once I got into that position, that's just where I stayed.
Yeah, yeah. That's, we were talking earlier before we started the podcast. It's kind of difficult to speak about creativity in the gay community without getting into the tropes, because they've become what they are. I mean, we were talking, you were talking about hairdressers, and it's like, hey, I know what you mean, because I had two uncles who were hairdressers, one trained in Paris, and everyone always assumed, and we wouldn't have a problem with it. I mean, they both made incredible livings out of it, and good careers, obviously. But it is hopefully we're changing, hopefully we're growing, but at the same time, one part of us is going forward and another part of us is sliding backwards, which is kind of weird. I'm gonna jump over to our next guest, who's an artiste.
Well, I have a master's of graphic design. My name is Herby Thompson. I'm retired Navy after 30 years, and I moved home to Massachusetts to be with my family and friends. The most important thing for me when I was as a gay artist was I lived in San Francisco and I joined a life drawing group, and when COVID hit, I was able to rejoin the group virtually on Zoom, and now I draw life drawing every single week, once a week in San Francisco, back and forth.
Yeah, and that's how I got to know you, was from Kat Knutsen's figure drawing.
And figure drawing.
Right.
And it's been such a pleasure for me to go back and forth with people that I've known 30 years ago that I'm able to draw again with. And it's extremely exciting to be connected to the gay community, not only in Massachusetts, but in California, San Francisco.
Right.
And plus I got connected with Vancouver, British Columbia, which is very exciting as well. And it's been very rewarding for me.
It's also, I mean, come on, let's face it. It's got to be, the monkey on your back. It's got to be, 20 years ago, you're walking on eggshells, or as there's a Portuguese saying, walking on cat's feet, and now it's like, this is what I am.
Absolutely.
Take it or leave it, and
it's more comfortable.
It's more comfortable. It's much more comfortable.
I'm having
Sure.
I was speaking about a job I had when I was 24,
Yeah.
because that was my first job as a head chef,
Mhm.
and it just so happened to be this place in the south end of Boston, and I kind of fondly refer to them as the gay guy caterers, and because the owner was gay, and he won all sorts of like prizes as the best of Boston caterer,
Right.
2 or 3 times, and I came in to join, and so it was almost a non-issue because we were a collective of brothers and sisters who really supported each other, and we were really just having fun day after day, prepping and getting the jobs done, and we would bounce ideas off the wall, off of each other, and I was working with kids who were cooking was their day job, but they were artists at the museum school, or they had jobs as rock and rollers at night in the Boston rock scene, and it was a real fun, vibrant, creative collection of creative minds and creative people, and it was just great fun.
Oh yeah, I mean, I worked in theater. I was a set designer, and I worked as a cook, but somehow got elevated to chef. That's a whole other story. And sort of for a CIA chef to ask, what year did you graduate from there? It was like, really? But anyway, and sometimes I was the only straight guy in the room. So,
so this is interesting because
I was just going to introduce you. Yeah.
Jim was actually my gay chef in that story. When I saw that Jim was at such an elevated level and using local produce and connecting with farmers, I was like, wow, there is a huge, it just opened up so many doors in my mind for possibilities. And so like it was really important to know Jim was out there. Not that I didn't want to really harass him too much, but you know, doing these huge fundraising events for us, giving up his time for the causes that he believed in. It was just like, it was like a light bulb went off.
And ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the voice of our next guest, which I'll have her introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Sarah Cogswell. I own a farm called Cluck and Trowel. We're based in Little Compton, Rhode Island. It's a certified organic farm that produces eggs, chicken, some pork and vegetables. And then I also work full-time in New Bedford at Coastal Food Shed.
Excellent. So creativity when it comes down, you know, because Andy said, well, you know, I've got a farmer coming, but I said, well, probably artisanal, you know, back to the earth, organic, that kind of thing. And there is in art in farming, which people don't quite realize, as much as there is in art and culinary.
I think the fierceness or the connection, I would say, comes from wanting to be fiercely independent, not wanting to have a boss, not wanting to, you know, you're painting your fields in a way that you want. You are farming and producing a product and finding your own customers the way that you want. Very similar to like creating an art installation. And you almost don't care what people think. It's this like push and pull. Like you do want people to buy your product, but you're also finding those people who enjoy your product. So it is interesting in that way. And I like to think of it as you can change, you're growing constantly as well, and you're learning and you're like adapting your craft as you go. I don't know everything. I'm a constant learner, of course, a student for life. And the folks above me are my mentors. So in that way, that's how I directly relate to artists in the area.
You know, and when it comes down to that, I mean, none of us will ever finish learning our craft, our discipline, or have our practice so finely tuned.
Absolutely.
It would be a bore, to tell you the truth, if we hit that pinnacle. You know, it's like, okay, so we get to the top of the mountain, we look around like, now what?
I think if you are informed by your own creativity, or if you are looking for inspiration, you have to assume that you're always learning. And you also have to assume that what you're trying to do may or may not work. And I think that there's a sense of let go in all of that, because if you're just cooking and doing the same thing every day, and if you're, you can lose that sense of creativity because you get kind of boxed in.
We were talking about that earlier, where I was telling my marketing students when I was teaching that one of the toughest things in culinary and being a chef is, okay, so now you have a prize-winning recipe, or it's the hottest selling thing on your menu. You can't come in some morning and go, you know, I've never tried tarragon on that. I'm going to throw it in there. Now you've got this woman who just convinced her Aunt Nancy, oh, you got to have the chowder here. It's the most fabulous chowder I've ever had in my life. And then they sit down to eat, and she goes, it doesn't taste the same that it did the last 100 times I was here.
Yeah.
You know, so we were talking about, that's why we have specials, because it's experimentation and leftovers.
Right. I mean, you do, a chef or a restaurant or a business wants to have their clientele, that's their steady clientele, necessarily be, you want them to be satisfied or have them have no surprises.
Exactly.
And you might be, so that means what? Consistency or consistency. Or you're the kind of restaurant or house that where everything's different all the time, or everything's special, everything's creative. So it's really you're tapering a little bit to your clientele. You might have a clientele that wants the chowder to be the same, and they want baked scrod, and they want a particular boiled this or that.
I'm having flashbacks to certain clientele that I used to service. It's like,
or if you're looking for, say, the person, because a lot of people like to go to restaurants and they consider it a culinary destination. It's a bit of a hobby for people to go out and explore something new. And so you might be that kind of a restaurant that's changing things all the time.
Or somebody says, oh, we went to such and such a place last night. Oh, how was it? Oh, it was very, very good. What did you have? I had the baked stuffed shrimp. I always have the baked stuffed shrimp. No matter where I go, I have the baked stuffed shrimp. Like, why?
You know? Yeah, this reminds me of like the topic of failure and how close artists, I think, and farmers are to that line of like you're pushing yourself to the point of you're okay with failure, or you have to be okay with failure to move anywhere. And it's very same with an artist. like a farmer doesn't just farm, it's a lifestyle. So in all aspects of your life, it has to do with the farm and the food, and it's all encompassing. So it's quite exhausting, but in a beautiful way. And I would assume that's very similar to being an artist. But the failure piece is so important. Like my wife and I, we used to measure the seasons by how many times I cried in the field. And, we'd be like, what is this, a 5 cry a year, 2 cry? Are we down to, it's never been a 0. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
So you have to get right back up. You have to be okay accepting the failure and realize, and like, it's just fascinating.
I totally understand. I mean, my French Canadian side goes back to the 1500s.
Yeah.
And my brother and I are the only generation ever to have not been farmers. Mm. It probably explains why we wake up at 4:30 in the morning or something like that. Just naturally, But really, it is such a gamble to be a farmer because everything is going so well and then it's not going well at all.
Yeah, and that's why the successful ones have either figured out the variables and narrowed them down,
right.
And that's why a lot of folks do monoculture and
that's
so forth.
where the creativity comes in.
Right, and that's like what Jim's saying. They just narrowed it down. People want the scrod,
right.
And they want the chowder, and they want a big, thick, pasty chowder,
Yeah, that you can stand, you spoon up.
Right.
It's LePage's paste with clams in it, yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of these places are businesses, and there's monthly bills or the nut that you have to fulfill it month after month or year after year. And so you find, where we're able to pay those bills, and then you could be at the point where you can ask yourself, well, what else can we do? Mm. Because we do have a steady clientele now, and it's a self-perpetuating machine in a way. And now we're ready for more. And that's when you can get creative. That's the opportunity to get creative. Or you could use it as an opportunity to cookie cutter and go open another restaurant that's serving the same food, just in a different location.
And I've got a question for you. I've known so many restaurateurs, run successful restaurants, always pulling their hair out, always on the edge of, abusing some sort of substance because, and I used to work 90 hours a week. It was like coffee to get you going in the morning, and then whiskey to drowse you enough so you could sleep instead of just staring at the ceiling. And then you haven't seen them in a while, and you say, "So, hey, how's it going?" "Oh, it's going. Lettuce is going up." "So what's next?" "Oh, we're opening up another restaurant." It's like, so you have a headache, and now you're opting to have a migraine on top of that headache. I don't. Why do they do that?
Well, there's a trend in business to scale up.
Mm-hmm.
Or have multiple locations, and it becomes a feather in one's cap, and it becomes something that people want to chase. And so I don't know if the brakes have slammed on that, but there's a cautionary tale because so many people have not survived those years of abuse and working too much. And there's now the idea of sustainability is now coming into our life and lifestyle and choices. And you can't go year after year in any business, particularly chef work, if you don't have a sense of balance where your priorities and values are in check and or categorized, 1 through 3, 1 through 5, and so on. So I think what I'm speaking about is actual work-life balance,
right? Or
work-life hobbies, what you value, who else am I? Kind of a balance.
Herby, from the visual arts, it's really not any different. Before I ask you to step in, Jay Peterman, which I remember my students back at the time used to think Jay Peterman was a character on Seinfeld.
Yeah.
He said, no, he was a real living, breathing person. He was a cataloger. He came
out with, great.
Right? But he had a manifesto inside of every catalog that came out. And one of the lines was, when will American businesses realize that people want things that make their lives the way they wish they were? So when they're going into the restaurant, it's not just whether or not the chowder or whatever, or the baked stuffed shrimp is going to be to this, but what is the experience? There was Maxie's Deli here years ago, and the Poulos family was phenomenal. I used to tell people, you go in there, the first time you order eggs, have breakfast. It was a breakfast place as well. 2-3 weeks go by, and now you go there for the second time. Mrs. Poulos would go, 2 over easy, wheat toast, no that was, the food was good, but that brought you up to another step and level. Now, from the visual arts, I had a friend of mine, Bob Rodesky, come down to visit me from Milton. We're both painters, and we were talking about bread and butter, the bread and butter painting. So in other words, this is what you do to survive, Yeah, what do you do? Yeah.
For me, my bread and butter was I was a corporate artist for the government, for the Navy for 30 years. And it was pure, corporate. They dictate. I did what they wanted. I didn't do anything for me. And now, being retired, I get to do my own art. I get to really be creative. I draw what I want. I do anything I want. And you have to learn to adjust, and you have to be humble, and you have to step back, and you have to take criticism, which a lot of artists cannot do.
No.
I know so many people that I went to college with would never be able to transition into working for someone and doing what they want. It's a huge step. I was able to do it. Not everybody can do it.
Yeah, it is very difficult because my wife is the most passive graphic designer that I have ever met in my life, because when I was forced to do graphic design, and it wasn't the creative thing, you're like, oh my God, you can't, it was like, why am I used to call myself a sphincter muscle. Okay, because that's all I was. It's like, okay, so, and then my wife is like, no. My job is to make my boss look good by keeping the clients happy.
Absolutely.
And that is my purpose in life. And she has her own artwork that she does. She's a graphic designer by day. Exactly. And my brain doesn't work that way. I'm happy of being a painter, but then again, there's a whole other set of things that you have to deal with as well. Did you see that video that's been going around? I forgot who put it out. They've got one with Frida Kahlo, and they have one with Van Gogh. And it's the art director and somebody else. They walk into Van Gogh's studio and said, "Well, we got good news for you. We pitched this to the client." And it's like the Starry Night. You gotta find it. It is the most hilarious thing. And he's like, and we've got to change the title. It's called Starry Night. So in other words, you start off with a starry night, and next thing you know, you get the blazing sun over the desert, because that's what the client wants. And when I was in advertising,
I get that.
One of the best categories ever was the concepts that never made it to beyond the client. And they would always almost get the best of show.
Absolutely.
I think there's something to be said, like Jim was talking about before, about the chefs and the whole scene in Boston, right? Everybody's finding their outlet in a different way, a different creative way, whether it's music or spoken word or and I would like to think that Jim doing like the nonprofit gigs was like an out for him, a creative outlet that he could try something on, because it's a fundraiser. Right. So let's try this funky thing with these random radishes and whatnot, finding your way to release, because it is the grind. There's the grind in the kitchen, there's a grind, like you're saying, in the commercial art world, and there's a grind, I'll tell you, in the farm.
But the beautiful thing about your world is the color, the beautiful color of all the
it's nice of you to say. I don't think of it that way all the time.
All I see is color, though. Yeah. When I used to have to do advertising, I would actually go to the markets in San Francisco and pull the vegetables for the photographs to do the prop work, and it was so exciting to be able to the beautiful and all the.
Were you ever approached by the supermarket cop?
No.
I was, and I'll use, I'm being facetious, but I was interviewing apples for a commercial that we were shooting, and the apples had to be just the right color.
Absolutely.
And he's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm interviewing apples for a commercial." And I showed him my business card. He's like, "Oh, I just thought you were a little weird, but now, well, I guess you're weird and getting paid for it."
I love it.
Yeah, I approach it from smell first. If I walk into a studio, I smell that if you're doing oil or whatever you're doing, and the same thing with the farm field. Like, you know, I'm a chicken farmer, so there's a lot of different smells.
I think the birds are beautiful.
Yeah, but like from morning till dusk, all the different smells that come and go.
Right.
I love that. That's how I kind of relate, and like the light. But it's interesting. The colors aren't. It's just so funny that's your thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, and I walk into Jim's kitchen or something, and I'll be like, I know exactly what he's cooking. I know exactly what's in it, and I'm curious what that one note is.
Right.
What is that?
But,
That's amazing.
You talked about that, and you flashed me back. My dad had to be removed from his household in Connecticut. A long story, and brought to his grandmother, my great grandmother, in Cibec, which is on the Gaspé Peninsula. And he was up there. He thought he was going to stay there for the rest of his life. He ends up coming back to the United States and staying, which I don't think was ever in his plans. But every year, for 2 weeks, and sometimes we had a month, he would get custody of me from my mother, and he was like a madman until he got to that farm. 14 hours, pee and gas. That's all he would stop for, okay? And the pee thing was, if you didn't hold it, you'd have to beg him to, you gotta pull off it now. And we get up there, and he was like another person, the person that we wouldn't see for the next 50 weeks out of the year. But I remember going into the hen house, which is pretty big, and the smell of ammonia is the first thing that hits your nose, right? And that weird, and I don't know if Stephen King ever wrote about chickens, but there's that that hum that's in there, and you're just waiting for one of them to strike out at you, right?
Yeah.
But the whole thing about being up there on the farm was the smells. Haying season, there's that smell. There's all these different aromas, you know, when you're turning over, when they're doing harrowing and plowing and harrowing and such. And I think that is incredibly important. You talked about oils. Oils is an aphrodisiac. You know, I mean, if they could put that smell in acrylic, they probably sell more acrylic paint.
Or like
right?
photography chemicals, same thing.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
But to me, it always smelled like onions or garlic. It always smelled like a marinade of some sort in the darkroom, right?
Yeah.
And then walking into a kitchen, Faye's Knotty Pine. Do you remember Faye's Knotty Pine? My dad ran a janitorial contracting service, and the smell of Faye's is still in my nose. It was a maple butcher block and garlic and tomato paste. That's those three ingredients together.
This is
phenomenal.
funny because my father was a refrigeration mechanic, and so he was, all the Portuguese businesses around here hired him for their fish tanks to fix them and to circulate the water, Demellos, you name it, Giamavos.
Right.
And then also Home Like Bakery. It was the first time that I smelled sugar. Like it was in you.
Yeah.
And I could play on the sugar stacks while he worked on something, and like bit of rodents there, whatever. But like fascinating. I like smelling sugar. You didn't want to buy a sweet afterwards because you had been immersed in it.
Yeah.
So I had nothing to like placate me at the way home, you know.
Well, my first boss, Ed Pickard at Gulf Hill Parlor, which was part of Gulf Hill Dairy, had this bizarre thing as a restaurant manager, bacon and shrimp. And his thing was, when he first hired you, eat all you want. And that was just it. It was reverse psychology. After a while, it's like, oh, did you have any more shrimp today? Like, oh, if I see another shrimp, I'm gonna vomit. That kind of thing, right?
Yeah. I'm thinking about the times I used to work at this catering company, and around the corner, we were really close to Chinatown in the South End.
Oh.
And it was really like going through a porthole to another country, and another porthole of aromas. Right, from the seafood tank to the hanging roast Peking duck, yeah, exactly. So those markets are pretty distinctive in terms of the smell.
Do you remember the I think it was the Golden Gate?
Yes,
the Golden Gate, if I remember correctly. My friend Jeff Moy, he was an engineering student, and somehow he was at UMass or SMU. He did something, and everybody said, wow, you're pretty talented. He ended up as a sculptor, and he did pretty well as a sculptor. But this is the guy that you wanted to take you to Boston, because he knew Boston like a cab driver. He knew every rat hole, gopher hole. He knew how to get around traffic. It was amazing. So he said, you want to go up? We're gonna get a bite. I said, yeah. And he's got this look on his face, and after it happens, you realize he's setting you up. So we walked in this place called the Golden Gate, and there's this man who looked like, if you remember one of the Lethal Weapons with Uncle Benny, they had the tongs there. He was that same thing, balding, stout man. And you walk in the door, and he points at you, and this is before the soup Nazi. He points at you, and he goes, beef tomato rice? And you're like, what? Beef tomato rice? I'm like, what do you say? You stand over there. You know, beef tomato rice, and then you notice. Oh, anybody who says yes, beef tomato rice, they get a seat, right? And that was one of the places. I'll never forget. What a concept!
I'm recalling the times that we would walk into Wally's, which was a famous jazz club in the south end of Boston.
Yeah.
It'd be full of jazz musicians, locals, and Berkeley College of Music kids.
Right.
And it was a small place. And it did not have a cover charge, but the minute you walked in, the bartender was like, "What are you drinking?" And you had to answer, and you had basically you had to buy something. But
I mean, getting back to the theme of Pride Month, what was as a farmer, I don't think your answer would be in the affirmative. I could be wrong, but in culinary and in the arts, was there a refuge of some sort? Because there was always, in culinary or in any of the, the fine arts, visual arts, there was always that, and, to the point where the straights were, that one eye thing, like they're trying to figure out if you are or if you're not. But was it a refuge?
What's your question?
Does that make sense?
Was the workplace a refuge?
Yeah, the workplace, your craft, your place of
So
where you applied your talents.
Well, for me personally, my craft and my background.
I mean, you're in the Navy, so that had to be like
tiptoe. No, I was a civilian.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right.
But the thing is, I was extremely respected because I knew my craft.
Right.
It had nothing to do with my. They didn't. I think they knew. I mean, I'm sensitive and gentle. I'm not, a wicked butch thing.
Yeah, well, let's go through all the tropes there. Yeah.
So,
you like cats?
I love cats. I had 5 cats,
Yeah.
So, I was extremely respected though, and that's where my safe zone is my art.
Yeah.
And it still is to this day. And
Yeah.
I've drawn with you, and you're a fantastic artist yourself.
Well,
so.
I told you, I was scared to death. I hadn't drawn the human figure in 50 years. And now I've got the former dean of the college in the next easel over, and I'm going, oh my God, what the hell did I do? And I have a drawing. Someday we're going to have to talk about my drawing, my teaching technique, right? Mm-hmm. That I was watching Ratatouille with my granddaughter. Mm-hmm. And Chef Gusteau says, anyone can cook. And all of a sudden it hit me like, anyone can draw. Don't give me all this BS. Give me all this BS.
Both are very true.
Yeah, it's true. Anyone can cook and anyone can draw.
Absolutely.
You have to, really?
No.
Now, not everyone can farm, because that's a whole nother thing. Oh, because you can't draw or you can't cook.
100%. I can cook pretty good, not dry.
You can, yeah.
Give me a good stick figure.
Well, it's preconception, right?
Well, to go back to your question, I apparently the road before me was paved so well by those, ahead of me, that I didn't have any problem as a gay female approaching farming, approaching food, approaching catering.
Right.
I really didn't. And I think the hardest part is the farming part, because those before you are very, as a nutshell, conservative, and especially around here. And you kind of turn a blind eye to it because it's just what you grew up with. But when you really dig deep, you're thinking about what you're not going to talk about with that particular farmer that you're going to go visit, and you're going to help him create a wholesale account with UMass Dartmouth. You're going to really help his business. You're going to connect this and that. You're going to talk to the chef. You're going to really go to bat for this farmer. He also has a massive Trump sign in his yard, or he has he has clearly said fag to you. and not to you, but just general. It's in his vernacular.
Yeah, exactly.
So similar to how
even the Pope screwed up twice this month. Right?
Oh, right. So
you approach it like your family. Like your family, I don't know about you, but I have family that does that as well, and so I have I have to just not talk. You just put them in a box and like move on with your life.
Yeah.
As I'm
absolutely.
I'm recalling a couple. Before before my first sort of big job, I had several jobs where I was building my resume or just getting experience, and they were largely negative. And one it was just a part-time job. I needed extra, pocket money right while I was going to school. But the atmosphere at this particular hotel was basically like a men's locker room, and it was really just a chef of men or guys. There's a couple women there, and she caught some hell. I remember. And, the chef would reward the team with a case of beer at the end of the week. And it was that kind of a vibe or tone.
Yeah.
And it was really, I was really disappointed actually, because I had high hopes about becoming a professional chef. And the word professional was used in a new way, actually. This is in the 80s. And they decided to make the distinction that cooks are professionals.
Yeah.
And what is that exactly? Right. So to bring a sense of professionalism or respect to your work, or to have it recognized as such. But the culture didn't catch up until, the culture changed when I had the top job and I was not going to run kitchens in that particular way. And I also realized the importance of having a balance of men and women in the kitchen. And sometimes I used to say I couldn't just have one woman in the kitchen. There had to be at least two or more, because she would get caught up in the locker room talk.
Oh yeah.
And some female cooks can really keep up with that.
Yeah.
But it's really not who they are, and it's not who we are actually either.
It's exhausting too.
It is exhausting.
I'm laughing only because I'm flashing back to all these other experiences that I've had, and I've had a lot of them in kitchens. And
I remember I actually left cooking for a particular period of time because I was so disappointed, and I took a part-time job. I actually, do you remember the want ads on the Sunday Boston Globe? That's how we would find jobs, way before Craigslist.
My first job in Boston was,
and
the Phoenix was another one too for the jobs. Yeah,
I saw an ad that said kitchen help in Palm Beach, Florida, and I was like, I'm going to take a leave of absence and I'm going to go with a friend of mine. And it was really a matter of making a phone call. The GM just interviewed us over the phone, and he said, "Oh, well, just come on down and we'll find something for you to do." And I told a couple friends that I was doing this, and they happened to know someone who lived on Palm Beach, and lo and behold,
Worth Ave?
Well, yeah, basically. I lived around the corner from Worth Ave.
Yeah.
Because this friend of a friend owned a couple apartments, and they were right around the corner from the hotel I got the job at, and I could actually walk to work. It was really, really fun experience. And I was just a helper. I was just a cook. I was doing like room service food, or I was doing salad station food. And the cooks were from a famous restaurant in Cape Cod called Chillingsworth, which I don't know if it's... I don't know anything about it.
Out, way out in Provincetown.
He
was actually the executive director of CMAP for a hot minute.
Really?
So his chefs took the summer off. They went to Palm Beach, and they were running this kitchen. And they were nice guys. And but the maitre d' was someone who was like the maitre d' at the Ritz-Carlton in Boston. And he was very like very starchy and very old school. And he was super polite to the customers when he needed to be, and then he would come behind the kitchen and trash them.
Oh yeah, the moment you hit those doors.
But one of the things he did that I was really that struck with me is he took me aside and he was like, "You see those cooks over there?" He goes, "They don't have what you have." He's like, "You have it," and I kind of was taken aback. I didn't know what he meant by that, but he might have recognized that it's a good compliment. He might have saw I was a young gay guy. He was an older gay guy, and he had my back, and gave me that kind of compliment that was a head scratcher at the time. And I did go back to Boston. I quit that job within a month. I had sort of a transition job that lasted 3 months, and then I landed that big job as a head chef. And I was just a cook at the time, but I was promoted to head chef because the owner fired the chef, and he was like, "Do you think you can do this?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "I hope they don't find out how young I am," you know. And it was really a nerve-wracking experience, but so much fun ultimately.
I would tell my daughters, you can always tell the type of organization you're working in a restaurant if you become the senior person within 90 days, because the turnover is so bad that, you know, people are just churning through that whole place.
So that's a truism that I was able to capitalize on. And I did have, I knew I had 3 months to prove myself. I had to get through the holiday season, which in the catering world is a big deal. And I got through it. I would take the contracts home, and I would take my order books home, and I would just study and make sure you used to have to order food by fax machine or answering machines. So I would leave all my orders on someone's answering machine and hope I got it right.
Well, you know, Sid Wainer, I mean, I used to call Henry Wainer
personally.
Personally, but before I go further, folks, if you're just joining us now, this is Ron Fortier with the South Coast Artists Index. This is our first live stream podcast we've ever done. We're helping to celebrate Pride Month at Play Arcade. And we are one of the newest partners for AHA, and we're going to be doing this every AHA from now on. And with us this evening is we had Andy Pollock, who is the president of the LGBTQ Network, who had to leave for an appointment. I think he might be back. We have Herby Thompson, who was a graphic designer by day and is now a full-time fine artist, right? Yeah. Sarah Cogswell, who is a chicken farmer, but not a dumb cluck. But it's clucks and...
It's called Cluck and Trowel.
Cluck and Trowel.
My wife I married an artist. That's the other thing.
Oh.
So we can talk about that too.
And I think I met you before when you talked about CMAS, right?
CMAP. Yeah, I'm on the board of CMAP.
This was like way back when.
Yeah.
When they did the denomination for the wine region, the appellation for the wine. I was one half of the wine guys.
Oh my God.
Yeah, way back when. Yeah,
I remember that.
That's a whole nother story. Right.
That's funny.
And then we have Jim Mercer, who is a chef. And what was the other thing about horses?
Well, I call myself a career chef because I certainly did it for a long time. Right. And my first passion in life actually is horses. And I manage a small horse farm in South Dartmouth.
Which one? Was it on Gulf Road?
It's on Barney's Joy Road.
Barney's Joy Road.
Yeah.
Right. All right.
I know.
Because there was one across the street from us, and I remember every Saturday, I guess the kid had, it was like the carrot and the stick, the son, and if he mucked out the stables, he would get a banana split for the princely sum of 85 cents for a banana split. I could smell this kid the moment he crossed the road into the parking lot. I mean, he reeked of horse manure.
Yeah, I went to UMass Amherst, and at that time, after high school, I had no thoughts of farm food, nothing. I just had no direction in my life. Right. And I walked into a party, and I looked at this kid. There was a guy standing there in Carhartts, and his shoes were, like, he had boots on, they were a mess. And I said, "Are you from Westport?" And he said, "Yes." And we became fast friends. He was dating the woman that was in the party. I was like, fantastic. Let's talk, because I wasn't from far away from Dartmouth.
Right.
So much fun. It's so great to see like a bit of home when you're not so far away, but when you're not connecting to anyone and you see someone walk in and you can smell them and you love it.
Well, at one time too, the farming community was very tight because if you had a harrow that broke down, if you had this or whatever, everybody helped everybody out. And
I would argue that if it wasn't always tight, it is getting much tighter still.
Really?
And with, like you're saying, the sharing of equipment, precisely. And because the land base is getting smaller and the value of land is going up, and it's becoming exhausting in itself just to keep the land that you're farming and not have it developed, and to find, if you want to grow, it's impossible to almost grow on more land. It's more like you have to do more on what you have. So we are sharing. we're sharing staff, we're
Right.
sharing resources, especially since COVID. It's been extremely hard. And I would say kitchens are in the same area to find a workforce that is willing to work for what you can provide, because thankfully, like, time became precious during COVID.
Right. Yeah. No. COVID brought its evils and its pluses, its goods.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, what good came out of COVID? I mean, well, that's for another podcast. That's for another story, you know?
But I do think we have such a unique area here where we have the weekend warriors, right? We have the outer folks town, whatever you want to call them, the second bedroom community, right? Because I live in Little Compton. It's just, it's my life.
Yeah. Well, Julia Child was she in Adamsville?
If she was, that's amazing. No, I don't know.
I one time I had my own advertising agency. I was the agency of record for the New Bedford Seafood Co-op.
Yeah.
And this is at a time when they were passing out. This is in '92. They were passing out flyers. I was working with John Bullard. The fisheries were under pressure, government pressure, stock price, all that other stuff. And 88 days at sea, moratoriums, and all this other stuff. So there was Fishboat 92, and now that they changed the name. I don't know what they changed it to, but it's called Fishboat 92, and it was bi-coastal. So it would be 1 year in Boston, 1 year in Seattle, 1 year in Boston, blah, blah, blah. I'm running down the hallway for something, and who do I see but Julia Child?
Wow.
And I said to myself, okay, I'm going to be one of those people, okay?
Yeah.
Miss Child, she just finished doing a lecture. Could you please sign? I don't have anything else. Could you please sign my business card? Nobody will ever believe I saw you. And yes, you've probably heard the story a million times. You know that I've watched you since the very beginning, okay, on public television. She looks at my business card and she says, "Oh, Mr. Fortier, you're from New Bedford?" I said, "Yes." "Do please sit down." She spoke with me for 20 minutes.
Wow.
It was absolutely.
That is so cool.
I got to cook in her kitchen.
Did you?
Yep. It was really surreal. It was her house would actually host. She would open her house to host small gatherings.
Was this the one? Was it Adamsville or Little Compton? Or was
No, this
their
house
other
was
one,
in Cambridge.
Okay.
This is where the television show was.
Right.
And she would host small events, like 30, 50 people. And the I think it's called Alliance Française. It's a French organization, and they were promoting the anniversary of a cooking school called the Cordon Bleu.
Right.
And they had chefs.
She wore her patch all the time.
I think, I'm not sure she went there. I'm not sure. But anyways,
Yeah.
the chefs from France were in Cambridge, and they were going to have an hors d'oeuvre, cocktail party kind of thing for this organization.
Mm-hmm.
And they used the catering kitchen I had in the South End to stage it. And I was basically just their helper. Their gopher, their helper. And but when I was able to go with them to the actual house, and there I was on the stove, and I saw the island where they actually, she stood behind. And it's interesting, it was really all just a stage, because the island wasn't an island. There was actually people under there who would hand her things sometimes. And and the famous sort of pegboard with hooks.
Yeah.
And every item on the pegboard was outlined in magic marker. So that if you borrowed a spoon, you knew exactly where the spoon went. Or if you borrowed a pan, you knew where the pan went. And apparently that entire kitchen was unpacked or disassembled and reassembled in the Smithsonian.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
it's
see
there
that.
now. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I actually cooked there. So that's kind of
That's
cool.
so
Yeah,
cool.
it
Really nice.
is cool. Herby, I was having this conversation with my friend Bob about I've been on a self-imposed moratorium. I haven't applied for any calls for submissions for artwork. I haven't entered any shows whatsoever. I've just decided that for the amount of money you spend to pack up the stuff, to ship it, so on and so forth, I'd be better off buying the same, for the same amount of money, buy scratch tickets. I'd probably be better off. And there is a glut in the art world, and I think probably because of well, we're live. There's been a glut in the art world of artists, and thank you. It's either because they've always been there, but nobody knew because social media didn't bring them to the forefront, or something has changed in the world where when you told your parents you wanted to be an artist, what was their reaction?
My parents are really, because I grew up severely handicapped with cerebral palsy, I was really good at only one thing. I was, and they encouraged me back. They were like my father was a drummer in a band in the evenings.
Mm-hmm.
They were kind of like, very creative. They were encouraged the arts. I was very fortunate. My parents were not at all negative about it. My brother was very athletic. My sister was very, perfect. They were both perfect children, and I was not.
Yep.
So they encouraged me to focus on my artwork.
That's pretty good.
I was very lucky.
Yeah, you were lucky. You were very, very lucky. When you told your parents, was that your initial choice in life, was to be a cook?
Well, my initial choice was to be a professional horse person, a professional trainer.
Okay.
And I actually had a family member who did that. And so that really was the secret dream. And, my dad couldn't afford to put me on that path. And I think there was just like this aha moment. It happened during the week when the schools were introducing vocational school programs, whether it be auto mechanic or shop or culinary.
Right. Yeah,
And
you had what they call that,
went-
Discovery Week or something?
Yeah, I went to see the culinary program, and the man who was running the program was really treated it as a serious endeavor.
Where was this at?
This was in Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so I really got inspired, and I felt like I had a mentor in this person who ran the program. And I just, basically went home and announced that I'm not going to do the academic track. I'm going to go to vocational school and study culinary. And I was really surprised that my dad was not supportive.
Really?
I was really surprised. And I sort of thought, like, well, now what? I really kind of threw up my hands in a way in discouragement. But I think it was just a matter of days or a week, before he gave me the go ahead. But
that's interesting.
I know, I was surprised by that. But once I was in the program, the teacher, who really was a mentor, I credit him with teaching me how to hold the vision for myself, because during the interview process or the presentation of the class, he said, if you take this program seriously, you can get an advanced standing scholarship at Johnson & Wales that would save you quite a bit of money. And the advanced standing program was for people who are already in the business. Mm-hmm. And you could test out of all the classes or the freshman classes, and you would go through an intensified course during the summer, and by fall you would be a sophomore. So you would get a 2-year degree in 1 calendar year. And that's what I did. So in 10th grade, I knew what I was going to do, and I knew where I was going to go right after graduation. And that was, I started college 2 weeks after high school graduation. The only thing, he also mentioned, like, you're going to save all this money and you could take that money and go study in Europe. And I was like, you can? And I didn't get to do that part, but I did do precisely what he said. I studied hard. I took that advanced standing test, which the hardest college test I ever took was in 11th grade of high school. Wow. Isn't that funny? I flew to Providence. It was a 2-day exam, and you had to score like in the 90th percentile to get into the program. I don't know if they still do this program, but it's a really great thing to do because the pressure's on, but the payoff is really good. Because you finish, like I said, you get a 2-year degree in 1 year.
Well, here's, I'll get to Sarah in just a bit, but my grandson, there's some consideration to going into the Coast Guard, following the steps of his uncle who spent 22 years in the Coast Guard. Very nice pension, so on and so forth.
Oh, yeah.
And we went and visited a base, a Coast Guard base. And the two bosun's mates were just phenomenal young men. And they're not recruiters, but they saw in him themselves when they were that age. And they told him, okay, you got to make X amount of money as soon as you sign up. And if you have any other inclinations and such, for example, for culinary, you get a $75,000 bonus. If you go to Johnson & Wales, you get a $100,000 bonus. Okay, we're 2 years into Johnson & Wales. And he said, oh, and by the way, Coast Guard chefs more than likely end up cooking in the White House. So if that isn't another incentive for you. And there is this really interesting community in culinary at certain levels, obviously.
I had a very positive experience of community with the chefs of Boston. There was a time, what happened first? Chefs Collaborative, or no, CMAP is down here, but in Boston there was an organization called the Chefs Collaborative 2000, and it was founded in like 94, 96. And it really was a who's who of the Boston chefs. And we would literally just go to East Coast Grill or the Blue Room, Chris Schlesinger, and
Chris,
all these chefs, Steve
Chris
Johnson.
Schlesinger.
Those two men are both South Coast chefs, or
Right.
they were.
Right.
And but they started in Cambridge and Boston.
Right.
And Jasper White was there, who recently died. Stanley Frankenthaler was there. I mean, it was really a who's who. And farmers were invited to these meetings. This is how it happened.
Yeah,
you know?
I was going to ask you about
they
Schlesinger,
they created two things, what they called this. Let's change the center of the plate. So imagine having 25 influential chefs of Boston in a room who say, instead of having a meat, starch, and veg, let's reduce the center of the plate, the meat, and let's add something from ethnic cuisines or something from local cuisine. So instead of a starch, a vegetable, and a meat, let's shrink the meat and we'll add a grain. We'll add a secondary vegetable. Or we're going to write the farmer's name who produced that vegetable. And so suddenly all these chefs were on board with shrinking the center of the plate. And they were also on board with buying local. And there would be farmers in the room who say, hey, I want to sell to you guys, but I can't afford to drive to Boston more than once a week. And it was really a matter of, hey, raise your hand if you want to buy from Ed, the farmer in Sharon.
Right.
And people rose their hand, and Ed now had a reason to buy or come into Boston again and again. And I strongly credit Chris Schlesinger for that.
Yeah.
And I credit, I think he's the first one that said Eva's Herbs or Eva's Greens on his menu. And so Eva became a bit of a legend after that, and this is in the 90s.
Yeah.
Right.
So
the Back Eddy.
Right.
Then the Back Eddy happened.
Right.
But I was in the room when these seeds were planted, and you can see the secondary and third and fourth iterations of those seeds are with us now.
Right. Yankee Magazine did a couple of spreads specifically on
And following
what you're
suit
talking
with the
about.
slow food movement that was coming about at
yeah.
the same time,
Yeah.
and the seeds that literally, that's where the farmers could connect as well, is if chefs were going to push a particular variety, like a Jimmy Nardello pepper, for example,
Right.
they knew they had a market for it. That failure was less, right? Because you knew somebody was going to buy this very particular item that probably has a very small yield, and it takes a little bit more care to grow this heirloom vegetable. But now you have a market. You have all these chefs in Boston interested in it.
Right.
And to Eva, I can't say enough, because she allowed my product to go to Boston. I would never have driven it up, and I had my eggs at 9 Park, so I was super excited.
Well, you sell the chicken flesh as well, right? The poultry.
Broilers, yeah,
You sell broilers,
I do.
and I'm sure one of the most. It's not just in taste. When I expatriated to Portugal, and I was there for 4 or 5 months, and I went to Coimbra just to go see Coimbra. My mother was a father singer, all this other background information. And I saw a Burger King And I said to myself, well, I want to, not for nostalgia, but I'm just sort of curious because my other brother's been living in Germany for like 30 years. And he's telling me, they serve beer and wine in those places and blah, blah. It's a little bit different. So I ordered a chicken sandwich. And I don't believe it was grown or processed there. It was probably shipped from the States. When I went to bite into that sandwich, the realization of, oh my God, I've been eating real chicken for the last 4 months. And the moment my teeth hit that bun, it was like, this is not real chicken. It's such a, and you're talking about the farmer, a cooperation between the farmers and the chefs. In Figueira, where I live, it was like, that was, well, what else would you do? Everything's organic because everything, you see the same vendors going from one restaurant to another. You know where the produce is coming from. It's such a wonderful thing. I can't believe that an hour and a half has gone by. So I'm looking, we got about 5 minutes left. Herby, anything you want to leave us with? And I think what's really sort of good is that, yes, this is Pride Month. And yes, you are members of the gay community. But you know what? We didn't dwell on that. Why? Yeah. Okay. We're people, right?
Yeah. That's just a small segment
right.
of who we
and
are.
I'm
Yeah,
sure
it's
that,
I call it a small piece of the pie.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And there are, I could certainly recount stories where I might have felt isolated for that, or I felt a sense of fire to go do what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
That and it all added up, and I wouldn't say that they were negative experiences. They were challenges that forged or informed the decisions I made to move forward and move on.
Actually, I just
some people have it harder. Some people have it harder.
Yeah.
I don't know how or why I had the confidence I did, but if I knew my parents were weird about it, so I didn't mention anything to my parents. Or I knew
less is more.
Yeah, I knew it was at a time when you could just ride under the radar, and then when it's time to come up, you come up.
Yeah.
And connect with those that you need to when they when you find each other. It's like really special when you have a connection with someone beyond food, beyond farming, more of a lifestyle as well, and you share a blended family, all that kind of stuff that is really important to your day-to-day. When you experience that in your work life, it's special, right? You don't want to exploit it, you don't want to go over the top, but you want to just note it and say that's different and that's great. Wow. And also the next group of folks underneath us, age-wise, I'm excited now. I'm the old age of 40, and I want to just be like an encyclopedia to anyone who cares, and that's kind of exciting to share and to expand.
Well, trailblazing, pioneering, all that other stuff, and also
things have cycles, or they go full circle. Like I benefited strongly by mentors in my life. Started with the man in high school, that guy Nino, the maitre d' I told you about earlier, and I love finding mentors even later in life. Yeah. But I also realize that I am a mentor also, and
absolutely
have taught. There was a time when I'm just training and not just telling people what to do, but you're actually teaching and training, and you're teaching through this thing called food, but you're really teaching life if you think about it.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud of I've had some chefs that come through my kitchens, and they're out there in the world, or out there in the country anyways, with really fine jobs. And I actually went to a restaurant in Pawtucket that is owned by a woman who started with me when she was 19 years old, and she has a little place called Hangry Kitchen.
Yeah,
a good name.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah,
Hangry.
And like I didn't think I'd live to see like change. That's like a weird thing to say, but like even within, so I go to a Quaker meeting house, and that's actually how I know Andy.
And I was gonna say Andy.
So we go to the same Quaker meeting house. He's a farmer. He's married to Jeff. Like all these amazing things. But when he and Jeff were looking for like shopping around for a venue for their wedding, our Quaker meeting house wasn't an option. At that year, I can't remember what year they got married.
Okay.
But now flash forward to 2016, when my wife and I approach it. We were the first same-sex couple to get married at our meeting house.
Right.
So it was huge. Andy was there. Like just a celebration for the community of like what, like it seems like no shit, we should be able to get married there. But
right. Well,
like,
and then you've got obviously the younger kids coming up who don't realize that there was
any
a
struggle,
challenge, a struggle, all
yeah,
kinds of
and that I don't get too bogged down in it, but it is fascinating that just within just 10 years even it was completely different. And so
Are you worried that given the political climate,
things will reverse?
Yeah, for example,
I am blown away at how conservative my surroundings are in Little Compton. I am like disappointed beyond belief. Like, it's not a great thing. So that's where I'm struggling with currently, is trying to understand the communities around me and the fluctuation of people that come and go, and the people who are there year round, how I can connect to them and get to know them. Because we moved during COVID in 2019, and so I feel like I didn't really connect with all of them. There's only like 1,000 of us year round or something. It's very small.
Right.
I don't know. I'm just extremely disappointed, but that's fine. There's time for that. Like, I'm not too worried about it, and it doesn't affect my job or anything. It's just more of a mindset. It's something that wakes you up in the middle of the night. Like, why would somebody put up this sign that says, this is the only flag that matters? It's an American flag. That is very common. It's very subversive. And in fact, Little Compton Town Council chose to not fly the gay pride flag. They voted to not.
Yeah, we had the same thing at Fairhaven a couple of years ago, and all of a sudden it was amazing how many people came out and said,
our town council will not be changed. The school had to fly. They flew it, but like,
but you're having gay pride over in Fairhaven this year.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's awesome.
I think it's only the second year, maybe.
Yes,
but it's a weird town because, my wife is African American, so with the political climate, we're worried about Loving versus Virginia because they roll back abortion. Yeah. They're trying to roll back gay marriage.
Yeah,
and it's like we're sliding down this.
So
really
we teach our son this. All we can do, right, is like educate the next folks, and so our son is going to actually change the Constitution. I don't know if you know that, but that's what he's going to do. He argues with us every night. We're like, no, that's your job.
So cute.
Okay, honey, that's what you're going to do.
He's going to be.
You're going to rewrite it and make it better.
He's going to be an advocate. He's going to be an advocate one way or the other. And,
absolutely.
And in many Romance languages, advocate is a lawyer.
That's what he's going to be. So I love it.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. So I just realized, okay, that was the reason why an hour and a half went by so fast, because it was only an hour. So if anybody has to use the facilities or whatever, we'll just pick up, get back to you when you return. What do you want people to know about your lives as individuals and also as your lives in your professions? Let's start off with Herby, because Herby is the non-culinarian here, so he's I want to make sure he's brought in.
I think treating everybody with respect is a huge important thing to do. Whatever your profession is, whatever your lifestyle is, you should treat everybody equally. When I worked for the Navy, one of my biggest things is I helped diversity whenever I could, to bring acknowledgement and to make everybody equal within the diversity community, within the gay community, within all the different ethnic backgrounds. And the Navy is a melting pot of people, and I wanted to make everyone fair, and I worked really hard to bring and show a positive to gay people. It's very difficult within a very conservative, but I was extremely respected for that, though, because I went out of my way to make that happen, and that was like an advocate. I was a fighter, and
no, I understand that.
Making sure that there was a positive view out there. It's huge to do that.
Oh, it is.
Huge.
It is, and then just on a basic human level, my mom. And if you listen to the show a lot, you probably hear, your mom's going to be 98. Yeah, my mom's going to be 98. She was an unusual mother for the 50s and 60s. Her father was a socialist communist, a crypto Jew, so very unusual background circumstance. And the thing was, if there's a student in your class who is different from others, whether it's by color or whatever you sense the difference is, you go up to them and say, hey, my name is Ron, you want to be friends? Because she said your life will be much fuller than that, and much better than the people who are going to persecute them or, and pick on them and so on and so forth.
Absolutely.
That makes a huge, huge difference.
Absolutely.
So one of the things I was talking to Andy about was that we'd love to be able to get an underwriter for a 10-episode podcast series focused on the LGBTQ community, that not only speaks with contemporary artists, visual, performing, literary, culinary, but also talks about those who are gone, the ones who really had the big, big challenges. And I'm getting, that happy child on the, wow. It's almost like they're like right in our laps here. But seriously, those who had to deal with the struggle, had to tiptoe, had to, they couldn't come out and couldn't say. Do you, each one of you, know of anyone who had to go through that? Because one of the reasons why Jeff and I started this whole thing was to resurrect souls. And believe it or not, the contemporary ones are easy. And then when people say, oh, how's the Artist Index doing? And it's like, well, we're doing well. We're almost 200 podcasts. But it's the dead people we have a problem with. And everybody laughs. They think it's funny. It's like, no, you don't understand. We're trying to get these people who came. Some of them were successful. They made a living. They left their mark.
I'm just gonna say I'm an uneducated gay person, and my wife would kill me because she is like she's got the books. She understands.
Oh, really?
She is well educated. She has taught me about gay history. I never had any education as a child, certainly not at school, obviously, and had a gay uncle who died of AIDS. That's it. That was and it. Nobody talked about it. He just suddenly had lesions and then he passed away.
You're so articulate, though. I mean, you would never know.
No, thank you. And if my wife is listening, I apologize, but she knows it. I am completely uneducated in the gay realm. Even when Andy talks to me sometimes, I'm like, so he shows a couple of films at his house sometimes, and I'm like, thank you.
and I was going to ask you, but why is that? And it's because I guess.
Well, I haven't done the work either.
It just wasn't spoken of.
Yeah, I know.
And it was awkward.
I also didn't seek it out.
Right?
I do have a little bit of that in me. I've just kind of blazed through and done what I want to do and yada yada. But now I'm realizing kind of missed the boat a bit. I didn't really do what I should have done and researched and talked to folks. I'm like, whatever. So I'm in that phase now.
Right.
So I'll listen to this podcast.
I mean, there are people like, oh, what do you want to bring that up for? It's
important.
It's important.
Mm-hmm.
It's important. I mean, I just think of my life in the theater, which was happenstance. I was a senior, my senior English teacher, who I suspect was gay. Doesn't matter. His family was all theater. I mean, these were the people who would say they were born in a steamer trunk in the back of the Strand Theater kind of people. I don't remember how he knew I was an artist, an aspiring artist. But he said, hey, I'd like you to do the set design for Oliver. And I'm like, I've never done a set design before. And he said, I'll show you. It's really easy. And so I did the set design. I learned a lot about that. And as a result of that, somehow my designs got to, which I didn't know, he was working for the Colberts. Jocelyn and Joseph Colbert of the SMU Opera Department. And people's like, there was no opera department. Yeah, there was an opera department at SMU. And they saw the designs and said, would he like to do some designs for us? So I started working for them. And then, so now you're working with a whole bunch of different kinds of people. And the only thing that mattered was everybody was creative. And if you had in art and in culinary, right? In fact, there's always a problem, and it's not like people. Wow, that's getting loud. People get use the word problem is already a negative. A problem is a challenge that needs to be solved. And so I'd love to be able to have somebody speak about this man and all the people he introduced me to, because they were all together, they were safe, but separately, they had to skate on that thin ice all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that really
Don't ask, don't
bothered
tell.
in my lifetime. This is me just complaining. I've had a couple of people where I was like, "Come on, tell me you're gay, please, just express that you are," and they didn't, and it was so hurtful. Like I was like, I know you are. Like it's so painful to both sit there and be like, "Look, can we just talk about this?" And in a professional setting, because like you're working with them, you're developing a program, and you're executing a program, and you're wrapping it up, and the whole time
Yeah.
but like it can't be said. It's
like the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
You can smell it.
And I feel like I was right on the cusp of like age and time where like you still were just not, you weren't going to ask, and if you asked, you'd be, it'd be a negative thing.
Oh, it'd be like, why did you do that?
Well, it's like, of course I'm not, and then they're lying, and it gets worse.
Right.
Oh yeah. I think that I got to benefit by the power of numbers, because I lived in the South End of Boston, which was a up and coming gay neighborhood. Basically, it was Boston's equivalent of Greenwich Village or something. And that's what it seemed like. And there was a place to go on a Monday night, on a Tuesday night, on a Wednesday night. There was always a place to go, and you would really just see your people.
There's safety in numbers too.
Safety in numbers, and safety in what you're doing on a Monday night or a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night. This is where you knew where to go way before social media or people connecting through phones. That was really word of mouth, or certain local independent newspapers or publications that would tell you where events were or parties or so on and so forth. Nightlife was really a big part of the culture and a good part to create community.
Yeah.
So I definitely benefited from that part. And lo and behold, there's other pockets of little, any town you go to now, there's going to be a gay neighborhood or a gay group, or they used to call them gay ghettos, but it's sort of like that.
Well, when I was at the University of Miami, I remember the first trip to Key West. And I remember somebody saying, "Oh, there's a 7-mile long bridge." I'm like, "There's not a 7-mile long bridge." But anyway, so when we got down, there was a Holiday Inn, which was there at that time. You have to take from off of Route 1. You have to take this hard left. And all of a sudden, I remember my first thought was, Jesus Christ, how did I end up in New Bedford? I mean, the architecture, everything looked like New Bedford. It was the strangest thing. Then I met a person later who told me, well, it ought to, because they used to have these women who would dress up like mermaids, and they get these guys to come close on their boats. So we would just take all the stuff off, and the old timers, and they built this place. But this was at a time where the gay community was finding refuge down there, and and it becomes almost a trope to they rehab the entire place. I mean, they made it what it is today. It was
where Pete Town would go in the winter.
Exactly.
And that was sort of the reputation of it.
Yeah. So everybody, denomination, ethnic group, everybody has something to contribute, and I don't know what the problem is with people who have a problem.
It stretches your mind for the norms that you're not used to. Like, if I come on so strong and I'm such a crazy butch to you, like it can set you back a bit. It's interesting in farming though, because if you were to pluck some Midwestern farm life, she's really fucking tough. Like she can wrestle that cow, she can like harvest the potatoes and like milk and rear the children.
Right.
But you don't look at her as like a butch. Right. Even though she can do everything that I'm doing, I just have short hair, and like, so just a couple things really set people in a different way. And it could be a lisp in the way you talk, it could be, but everything else, it's like, it's just fascinating what sets people to a different thing, or what you see in their eyes change as you communicate with them. And I'm fascinated by that. like watching people like observe me. It's just funny.
Well, you talked about P-Town, and I'm thinking about the artists in P-Town, a majority of which were gay, men and women, and a phenomenal community. That the vestiges are still there. Why there? No one else. No, I mean, yes, there were spots across the country, but why there specifically? Which is
because it was
interesting.
I believe because it was so isolated.
Absolutely.
And
You didn't have to think about it.
They could become themselves.
Yeah.
And I grew up here all my life, and
Well, not yet, as they would say in Maine. You lived here all your life? Not yet.
and really, and then I mean, my parents would take me there as a small boy.
Yeah.
And it really hasn't visually changed that much. But I remember, I mean, I was like 10 or 11, and I would see, I knew what was going on at that age.
Right.
That's what I think is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But
It's
it
like,
was
hey,
so-
wait a
But
minute.
it was very subtle, though. I mean,
Yeah.
It was very subtle, and it was, to me, it was beautiful. I mean, I felt comfortable there. And my parents were pretty cool about it.
So, I mean, you said you know absolutely nothing about gay history.
Thank you. Yes,
So
that's right.
I'm thinking about in New Bedford. I mean, there was the
So
that one bar.
So like bars, okay, whatever. But the gay, where I found a home in New Bedford was in the indoor soccer ring. Like this is like lesbians around here play soccer, and they're really good at it. And we play at Champions, and we have a network of teams. It is so much fun. It's like too much fun. Like, and there's a little bar there as well, so that you can like congregate afterwards. And this created so many friendships for me, and created like spring leagues, summer leagues, like a community. And you don't have to. Obviously, there's non-gay people there too, but like it was so cool and so releasing just to like. It's like a dating pool too. That was fascinating in my 20s. You saw people breaking up right before your eyes and hooking up with other fascinating.
Right.
And it was something where the guys weren't there, which was also very cool. Like it was a women's only league.
Well, there's also that thing too where the term bachelor farmer, I thought about that as you were talking before. The bachelor farmer just pretty much meant, well, it's like the spinster sisters.
Yeah.
And these people were like kind of below the radar, but they were visible, and people said, oh, they just never got married. So it was, it was kind of weird, right?
I think you're sort of answering your own question, because
Yeah,
a moment ago you
yeah.
said, why do people care? Like, why do they care to be upset, or why do they care
Right.
to be negative? And ultimately, people are open and supportive, and they might adopt codes of approval, like the bachelor farmer,
Right.
oh yeah, and and no one really cares or responds.
Exactly.
Or we're tribal by nature, so we all find our groups. You found a soccer group in a town called New Bedford.
It's fantastic.
It's random, but it's fantastic. And artists got together in Pete Town because it was the end of the earth, really, and the East Coast.
Yeah, the God's finger.
And they, people know a good thing when they see it. And so there's power of numbers, and it just became a thing.
Right.
And you could point to San Francisco, or you could point to Greenwich Village, or the South End of Boston, or Key West, to name
Fire
a few,
Yeah.
Fire Island. So,
Yeah.
and then there's this thing called gay nightlife, that happened. When did it start? The 70s. The nightlife started in the 70s, and I had a lot of fun in the 80s and 90s in Boston. And there's this thing called circuit parties, the black and blue party, or the white party, or the Labor Day LA. I used to call it being gay and on tour.
Love that.
And I was not gay and on tour, but I did over the years go to several of those parties, and
I have as well.
it was fun. It was fun.
So
I miss it.
There needs to be more. I haven't had a lot of fun as a gay person, and I'm excited to hear that.
And gay pride events, or gay pride in New York City was a thing to do and go to, and it was really a crown to be a part of it and to witness it. Wigstock happened after that, so
Wigstock.
So I guess we know how to party, we know how to have a good time. That seemed to go away for a while, but I actually heard a news program today about a guy who wrote a book about gay nightlife that's happening now.
Okay.
And I think the book is called like Gay Nightlife is Alive and Well. I'm not exactly sure, but I was very inspired to hear that. And what they're doing is, instead of opening a nightclub, they're having a pop-up party, a pop-up rave, like in an abandoned warehouse or like a storage shed someplace. And the power of social media can get a group of people to go to a party or a one-night party. And so I think that's what is going on to help keep nightlife alive, because you would go to these nightclubs or bars, you would find your tribe, just like your soccer team.
Right. Yeah.
We would just find a tribe of people who wanted to be with men who wanted to be with men, or women who wanted to be with women, or mixed.
And like, if you're not in the city and that doesn't happen, like, being in Dartmouth, being in Westport, you come to the city of New Bedford, and that is your social scene, especially when you're young.
As a young person, you organize your life around getting to those cities on certain weekends.
Yeah,
and you kind of work
to let your hair down.
Exactly.
Well, and because I was trying to turn this back into New Bedford to the creative gay community, or the gay community with. But
see, that's creative. So to create a pop-up venue where the network is underground, or the invitation is sort of who you know, that's creative. That's one model has died, but another one emerges.
Yeah. So in other words, do we have something even on a smaller scale that was similar to P-Town? That, and it was nudge, nudge, wink, wink all the time, that kind of thing. Yeah. Yep.
Sorry. And what we would do is we'd get in the car and go to Providence.
Yeah.
And hang out. That was our thing.
Yeah.
And, we were really excited. And then we'd meet other people from the school that had no idea that you're here?
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
Here?
Yeah.
I did that too. I met soccer players in Providence there's not many female gay bars. So to go to a lesbian bar in Providence was like so much fun. But on the pole was like the person that played soccer with you, and you're like, hey.
Right. Well,
it's cool though.
It's pretty cool, but it's also kind of sad. I want us all to hang out here. I don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or come out at that point.
Yeah.
Did you experience sort of a unspoken camaraderie when you went to those places?
I felt aggression. Honestly, I didn't have the best time at I could have fun with my crew that I came with, but there's a lot of weird territorial aggression and oddness. Maybe it was just my age. I don't know, but whereas you don't feel that in Provincetown.
I think that there's cliques really in any group, and cliques happen,
and probably mostly for safety's sake as well, right?
Sure, or things become cliques happen when the in crowd becomes a little big and they don't know what to do anymore.
Yeah, I feel like when you're not, it's not like people are suppressed for so long, but when you finally, you're like an alter ego at the club. Right. You're not necessarily yourself. You are more than, and you can be obnoxious.
Yeah.
So it's a club filled with obnoxious women.
Right.
That's how I viewed it.
We're gonna have to this time for real start to
wrap it up.
But so it's only been, this year makes 20 years of gay marriage. Massachusetts, the uber liberal bastion of the United States, supposedly, according to the more conservative people. But yet, I had a friend of mine I graduated from high school with. He was my lab partner. And he was attacked at Checkers.
Yeah, Mr. Perry.
Yes, him. Never knew. Didn't care when I found out, except for the fact, like, how could anybody hurt Bobby? He was the most gentle soul I've ever.
And a farmer.
Yes, yeah, his family on Bakerville Road. My God. And he wanted to go to veterinary school, you know. And we were the only two guys in a advanced physiology class full of, and I'll use the term egghead women. Okay, these were all the incredibly, bizarrely intelligent, high IQ women. And that's when at Dartmouth High School they started the computerization of scheduling. And we both looked at each other and went, we're in the wrong place. And Dr. Winey, who was the biology and physiology teacher, said, look, I'll cut you guys a deal. If you can get a C, I'll get you a B. If you get a B, I'll give you an A. He never had, I mean, he was like the most fantastic teacher. But when I heard about that, my heart went out. It was like, how? Why? Why?
Yeah, there's a couple of bars around here where you have this false security for sure. Yeah. You feel like you can just relax, have a good time, meet different people there.
Yeah.
Like people can come in off the street and you can talk to them.
Right.
But in New Bedford in particular, like even the National was super sketchy sometimes. Obviously, I mean, this is not like anything new.
I remember from when my stepfather was a fisherman. And take me in there. You all kinds of people in there.
But like, unfortunately, gay bars can be a target in a depressed community like this, and that is the saddest of all. Like, I can't even. The balls you have to open up a club and a place to welcome a community that you love, to know that you are vulnerable, is huge.
And there was two women that ran that lesbian bar in the South End. Is it the old bomb shelter?
What's called Gallery now, or it was called The Place?
The Place.
Love Place.
What they did for the performing artists was phenomenal. I'd love to be able to get them on a podcast and talk about the history of that place. No,
absolutely. And the new owners that have found documents from those two women, like the original lease, and just a lot of cool artifacts and stuff. It's interesting.
I mean, my whole thing is look, we all, whether we think we have left or we're going to leave something behind of value, we all do leave something behind. I mean, we've all lived and breathed, and we've loved and learned and all these things, and that is what's the most important thing right now. That's definitely the most important thing. So that's my final words of wisdom. Herby, yep. Chit chat, tell our stories and speaks, but thank you again. You're welcome. I mean, we have to thank AHA because they're the ones that we're now partners, and they Pride. They decided they're going to celebrate Pride. Yeah. Sarah, you're.
Oh yeah, I have no words of wisdom to part with, but I just want to thank you. And actually, Jeff and I graduated the same year of high school. Wow.
And he turned out to be a pretty He turned out to be a pretty darn good farmer himself.
Oh yeah, he says he wants to retire on a farm. So.
This guy could live off the land.
Excellent.
Yeah, I've known him since he was a kid, so to speak.
Well, I don't want to be showed up. I think.
and Jim.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and this is fun for me. Thank you.
And we all have to thank Andy because Andy. I mean, let's face it. I mean, Andy called you guys up and said, "Hey, we're doing this thing, blah blah blah." Yeah. He really put his neck on the block, so to speak, because I could have turned out to be a totally rip-roaring jerk, And I tried to bring all this is. It may not seem important to us today, but I think in the future, regardless of who you are, how you are classified in society, this is going to be valuable. And I would really love, and I'm going to put that out there again, I would really love for somebody in the community to subsidize or underwrite a 10-episode podcast series, specifically on LGBTQ in the creative community. Because you know what? It's not just one brick in this wall. It's a lot of bricks. And it's about time that we, I'm really saying this, it's about time it came out. Okay?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
It's a good vision.
All right. Guys are good?
Thank you. Yeah, good night.
Thank you so much, y'all. Thanks for listening. Thank you for dealing with our first ever live stream podcast. And this will be available on our website. theartistindex.com. Thanks much. Bye-bye.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.